Peace and blessings, beautiful people. Good afternoon, good evening, good night, good morning, good day to you, wherever you are at this very moment in time. Welcome to season 5, episode 1 of Ade Presents, Being You. I am your host, Ade Anifuoshi. It's been a while. It's been a long time since I've been here. And I was just thinking just before the show that sometimes the first step is the hardest. What do I mean by that? Now, I've been broadcasting for a long time, maybe 20 years. I don't know, but it's been a long time. But this is probably the longest break I have had. For those who follow me regularly, you already know. The last show, season 4, was September 2022, with the plan, the intention to come back in January 2023. Well, here I am, January 2024. If someone had told me that I won't be back doing the show until January 2024, I told them, just go sit your ass down somewhere. I love doing this. But yeah, that's what happened. So it's actually funny because there's a part of me that feels like it's almost like I'm getting on the bike, maybe not for the first time. I know they say you never forget how to ride a bike, but really it's been over a year now. So there were some things that were natural because I did it every week. I haven't done for over a year. It's like my mind is like, okay, let's remember this, let's remember that. And my heart reminds me, you got it. You're a channel. Just let it be, let it flow. So from that place is where I come to you today. And I'm excited to launch season 5. And it's been a journey. So let's just go right in. Where do I want to start? So once again, those of you who follow me regularly, you know my story. You know the story of my government retreat, the 40 days and 40 nights in a detention center, which led to me being back here in the UK. And before I continue, I really want to say this for those of you who are parents and also fathers. I mean, everyone will benefit from this conversation. But I want to bring a special attention to parents and fathers. This is a story, this is a conversation about how my 89-year-old Nigerian father asked for forgiveness and the impact that it had on me and that it has on me. You know, it's quite interesting because even now I'm feeling some kind of way. And that's why, I said earlier that the first step is the hardest. And I don't think I have issues sharing my story. People always say one of the things that they love about me, my transparency, my authenticity. As an Aries, we come here to be authentic, to find our own ways, to find our own way. But sometimes it's not always easy to be that transparent, especially when it's like me talking to you, but you are not here until you're here. But you're here virtually. You're not here right now, but you're here right now. So what am I saying? it's like I feel myself. There's a part of me that feels like this is going to be, it's just my eyes watering. I'm not tearing up yet, but it could happen. It could happen. So I'm going to give you a backstory because it is important. 2019, a god sister of mine sent me, I think it's an email or a text, I can't remember. And she told me about some production company. They're looking for Nigerians who were raised by a nanny while they were babies. And I was like, oh, yeah. Now, that spoke to me, resonated with me, because at that time, well, that's the time I started writing my memoir. So I've been asking deeper questions of myself, even from my, I don't think I've started to talk to my dad about that. Not yet. But I started to write things down because the 40 days and 40 nights in a detention center um, turned me inside. And it's horrible. Well, let me say it this way. Parts of that experience was horrible. Part of it was painful, was hard, was difficult. And especially at that time. However, I had to use the tools that I know. I had to live my truth. And it was a good experience to show myself, to prove to myself that, well, not so much to show to myself, but maybe to fine tune what I know, what I knew then, what works and what doesn't work. To be very clear about my own truth in the moment while I was going through that isolation, where my physical freedom was restricted. It was important to make sure that my internal freedom stays intact. And there's a lot of history with my journey. So let me fast forward because this story is like a branch, but I'm going to try and keep it on maybe 3 or 4 branches. And I'm seeing this right now because Nigerians, we're storytellers. Yes, I have this unintentionally. We're storytellers and we can tell stories. So I got the message. I don't remember if it was a text or an email about this production company looking for Nigerians who were, I don't know if if the term fostered was there. And if it was, it didn't even registered with me. Because I used to say, oh, I had a nanny, I had a white nanny. And it was just, I didn't think anything of it. But what I know about it, what I knew about that experience, that it impacted me in how I saw myself, in how I show up in the world, feeling different, not knowing where I belong, because I won't go ahead of myself. So I reached out to the production company. I'm eager and excited to the production company. Let them know that I'm interested. I got a call from one of the producers. We set up a date and he asked me questions. And some of the questions was like, wow, I never thought about that. I never looked at it from my father's perspective. What did he think? I never looked at it from my mother's perspective. What was it like for them to have their son go live with another woman outside of London in Hastings? And from the age of 2 months. I remember when my father told me that I went to my nanny, her name was Pat. She said, oh, yeah, we took you to Pat at 2 months. I was like, 2 months? I was upset. I was mad. I can't even tell you why, but I can also say that I felt like that was too young to give your child to another person to raise. Now, I don't think I had a judgment of my parents, but I was shocked. So as I was talking to the producer, he was asking me questions, and some of the questions he said, well, maybe you want to ask your dad, because my mom has made her transition a long time ago now. March 18th, this year, 2024, it would be 15 years. So fast forward, I had maybe another conversation with the producer and then never heard anything. It wasn't until I could get my time me right. It wasn't until 2022, around June, July 2022, that I heard from the production company. And when the message that was left by another producer was they wanted to know if I wanted to be part of a residential, a retreat. So I was thinking, are they asking me to facilitate the retreat for this conversation that somehow disappeared? Like, I was excited about being a part of it, and then I didn't hear anything. And then the next message I got was wanting to know if I want to be part of the retreat, to give them a call back. So I was like, yeah, to facilitate it, hell yeah, that's what I do. And then I thought, being a part of it too would be really good, so that I can take a introspective look into places in me that needs healing, that I've struggled with, and be able to ask questions that I may not have access to, but will naturally, organically reveal itself by being in a group with other Nigerians who went through the same experience. So end up saying yes, spoke to the producer, said yes, went to the retreat. Now, I'm going to keep saying this because it feels like it's been a long time. Those of you who follow me regularly know about White Nanny, Black Child, the documentary. And for those who don't know, it's a documentary about a group of adults, 9 of us, who went on a 5-day retreat to confront and explore just the impact of being raised privately fostered. Now, that practice, let me backtrack. So being privately fostered, there was 9 of us, and it wasn't unique to the 9 of us. From 1955 to 1995, it is estimated that at least 70,000 African children, West African children, went through that process, was privately fostered by white families. And that practice was called farming. And I still don't like it up to this day. It's like, nobody farmed me. I only found out about it like 2022, that there is that practice was called farming. Trying to see, there's so much to this story. But what I will do is, we went through the process and I gained myself. I reconnected with myself. I healed myself. I expressed myself. I felt comfortable in my skin as a Nigerian, because one of the narratives that I went in there with was, I didn't feel Nigerian enough. I was privately fostered from 2 months all the way to 4 years old. At the age of 4, my parents moved to Nigeria, and naturally, they took me back with them. And came back to this country, UK. Well, initially came back in 1984 and then moved back to live 1986. There's even more to the story that brought about displacement, but we'll keep it moving. I don't want to overwhelm you. There's so much to it. And that retreat, we knew it was going to become a documentary. And the first screening was in June or July 2023. I know it's 2023. I can't remember if it's June or July. But before that, back in December 2022, we saw the screening, the rough cut. The director wanted us to see what he was doing. And I think part of it was also, he had told us that the documentary would be ready around December 2020, January 23. But it wasn't ready, which is the nature of things. Editing is a long process. And the stories that we brought to the retreat was rich. There's so much. in the retreat, yeah, as I said, I healed a part of me. I healed a narrative of I'm not Nigerian enough, because there were other people who were privately fostered who felt the same. And I remember when one of the participants, Remy, said it. Remy's experience was different from mine. I went to Nigeria. I mean, I think she's been to Nigeria before, and my parents came to visit me at the nanny's house quite regularly. But Remy's experience was different. But I remember her saying, boy, just feeling, I know this is going to be an emotional thing. She said, sometimes I don't feel Nigerian enough. And I remember when she said it, I felt this wave move through my body. And I didn't say it out loud, but inside of me, I was like, me too. So watching the rough cut, there was a lot that came with that, which I don't have time to, because I feel like I'm repeating myself. There's so much to this story, but I'm trying to take a single story and how we got to my father asking for forgiveness and what that's done for me. My younger sister went with me to the screening, and I remember watching the rough cut, and I thought, wow, this is powerful. I left with some other feelings as well, which I won't go into here. I may not even talk about it, anytime soon, maybe later on. And people were sharing how that rough cut, which really was about 45 minutes, and you can see the timestamp, and everything was different. It was just what they were still working on, is really what I'm trying to say. What they showed us still carried the spirit of that 5-day retreat. My younger sister, I mean, she can talk. She would tell you she's not a talker like me, but it's rubbish. Let me use that phrase. While we were there, people were asking questions and sharing how the documentary moved them. And then suddenly my younger sister, who I just knew would not say anything, raised her hand to share. I was like, what the flip is what? You want to say something? Okay, this has got to be big. And she started to share. One of the things that she shared was how the documentary touched her, and having a better understanding of why I didn't like when they call me Oloyinbo. Now, Oloyinbo is a Yoruba word. Oyinbo means, in Nigeria anyway, it's a white person. And also it could mean the Westerner. So Oloyinbo in America could be the equivalent of what in America they call Oreo. Black on the outside, white on the inside. Here in UK, maybe coconut would be a good explanation of that. And yes, they used to call me that. That's like, here we go. Here comes the Oreo. Here comes the coconut. I did not like that, because I've always felt like I knew my siblings love me and I love them, but I always felt like the one who's different. I always felt like the outsider. And I struggled with finding my place in the family. Now, if you see us, we get on very well. But internally, there was always that thing. I was the only one that was born in this country. I was the only one who was privately fostered. And just the way life would have it, we've been talking about, actually more from her perspective, of what when people make a gross generalization and putting you in a box. So as she said at the screening, when she said now she understands why I didn't like it, I was so moved. I wasn't even expecting it. And she was so moved by the documentary that we on the way home, she was talking about it. My sister, I've never heard her say anything about people need to have it be in therapy or anything about therapy as part of healing and understanding self. We talked about it on the way home. We talked about the other part that I may or may never talk about. We talked about that part. And when we got home, home. I was in London. I live in Leicester. I was in London. Dad was in London. He was with my sisters. I have two sisters, an older sister and a younger sister, and an older brother. She got home. She was talking about it. It was on a Friday night. Saturday morning, she was talking about it. Now, I wasn't there in the morning, but I can hear them. I was upstairs in the bedroom. I can hear her talking about it and just going on. I mean, I was like, wow, this has been worthwhile just to experience my younger sister having this epiphany, just looking at life differently, looking at herself differently. When I got downstairs, they were talking about it. I sat down. I think I was about to have my lunch. Well, I could call it brunch because it was around 1 o'clock or something like that, and I hadn't eaten that day. And my father, while I was sitting down, turned to me and said, oh yeah, suffer me, kilashi, kilashi." I'm not speaking in tongues. I'll translate. So basically, it's like, come on, go ahead. Tell me what we did. Tell me what we did. And I realized, oh, he's been defensive. For whatever reason, what he heard, what my sister was sharing, he felt like the documentary was about blaming the parents who had to make the choice. Like Nigerian parents, Ghanaian parents who came over to this country in the 60s to study and do and work and send money home. And they had a vision for their family. And they had a goal. Most of them had a goal like, we're going to be in this country for a certain amount of time and then go back. Anyway, that was my parents' vision. So they did what they needed to do. They put me in with a nanny for 2 months because mom had to do, I think she had to go back to school. She was training to be a midwife. Dad was working. So when dad was saying, oh yeah, Kilashi, like, come on, tell me, what did we do? What did we do? And I'm like, oh boy, he's defensive. I said, Dad, it's not about what you did. I said, no matter what choices parents make, is going to impact. No. I don't want to hear that. Tell me what we did. And I was like, okay. Then I started the story again. I wanted to give him backstory to help him understand. This is not about a judgment. This is about my story and the choices that they made and how it impacted me. So I started again. He was like, Kilashi, what did we do? Feels better when I say Yoruba first, because then I can get into it. And at one point, I was getting pissed off. I was like, Dad, if you don't let me talk, I can't tell you. Which I was telling someone recently. I can only communicate with my father like that in saying those words in English. If I said it in Yoruba, I couldn't say it in Yoruba because we just don't do that with our parents, So anybody or Nigerians who are watching, you understand that. If you're not, then just do your research. There's a certain way you do not speak to your parents. There's just some things you may think it, and you may hear me say that I thought it, but I didn't say it. So anyway, he calmed down and I explained to him my story and the impact of being raised by another mother. I called Pat, my nanny, my Hastings mother, and my biological mother, my London mother. And there was a lot of back and forth. And the struggle with identity, the struggle with belonging and connection, the impact that it had on me. And he listened for the most part. And I felt like we got somewhere. That was on a Saturday. Now, my dad had health issues. So my sisters were the main caregivers. And I would go there every so often to relieve them, to be with dad as well. And if any of you know, caregiving Caregiving ain't for wimps. The first time I was there to be with dad and just support him and do all the things that we needed to do to make sure that he's well taken care of, he was clean and everything. It was like I knew I was there to help him and I was doing the things that I needed to do, following the following the instructions my sister gave me, my younger sister. There was a time where I just felt like a zombie. It's like I was feeling some things, but I couldn't do the things that I wanted to do for me. I didn't know if I should eat. It was just something was happening inside of me that I don't even have the words to describe it. I just felt like, what do I do now? However, I was able to pay it. My attention was on dad. And it's my first time. There were things I just thought, ooh, I don't know if I could do that. Oh my God. Anyway, so that Saturday night, Sunday morning, there was a situation that happened, and I won't go into details. Maybe around 4 a.m. And actually, I had just gone to bed then, because back in those days, I stayed up late. And I tried to go to bed early, knowing I have to wake up to be ready for dad. And while we were taking care and correcting the situation, and because when at that time, caring for my father was a sensitive thing for me, and I would be overly sensitive sometimes because I'm thinking about him. How is he feeling about it? I'm trying to do my best. This is something I've never done before. So I'm trying to talk myself into just like take a deep breath, do the next thing and the next thing. And of course, my father was kind of sleepy. I'd just gone to sleep and I had to wake up. But somehow in the moving things around, he got upset, like just snatched it off me. And I said, Dad, I'm just trying to help you. Now, later on, what I understand by talking to my sister and having a conversation with him, he didn't hear me say, Dad, like, I know this is hard. I know this is difficult. I'm just trying to help. And me saying I'm trying to help is really, I'm doing my best to give the best care. I'm not sure what that was the emotion behind that. I'm just trying to help. What he heard was, I'm just trying to help you. Why are you tripping? Kind of thing. So we finished, I'll say, the cleanup. And later on that day, my younger sister came back home. She worked nights. And I'd spoken to her about, oh yeah, this happened to Dad and I, but it's okay now. And then later on, I wasn't in the room. Dad spoke to her, my younger sister, about what happened. So I remember coming down the stairs. My sister was in the kitchen. And as I was coming down the stairs, she called me over. Dad was in the living room. And I saw that the way she called me, I was like, She said, I need to talk to you. She said, Dad told me what happened, and he's not happy. And when he was telling me, he was tearing up. I was like, oh, God. Of course, I don't want my father to be that heartbroken based on something that I did or didn't do. And I was just devastated. Like, even my best wasn't enough. And I remember thinking, as much care as I put into supporting Dad then, it still wasn't enough. And now my younger sister's telling me that he was tearing up. Well, she used a Yoruba word, which meant he was crying. But I've recently found out that it wasn't crying. Well, tears wasn't necessarily coming out of his eyes, but he was crying on the inside. My sister said she could tell by the sound of his voice. And she was telling me how to deal with that and what she does and how she goes quiet when dad does something that just gets on her nerves. And I'm like, that's not me. There are times I can be quiet, but sometimes I'm going to have to express myself. And she said, you just got to figure out a way. And I remember telling her, I don't know what else to do. I said, every time I'm coming here to London, I'm always anxious because there were times when my dad and I would get into a disagreement over something that I thought was silly. And for me, it felt like my dad would just come for me the way I think, the way I see the world for no reason, which felt like an attack on my identity, attack on who I am. And it's coming from my father. So it's like, what a flip. We didn't have a lot of disagreements, but we had, compared to my other siblings, we had quite enough. We had enough. And some of it just didn't make sense. Sometimes I'm asking myself, I said it out loud one time, I said, why are we even arguing about this? So I've always felt like there's something there. So anyway, when my sister said, maybe you and him should talk, I said, I don't know what to talk about. I don't know what else to do. I try everything. I said, when I come to London, I hate the fact that when I come here, when I'm around him, sometimes I find myself reverting to being a little boy again. I'm 55. Well, at that time I was, 54, I think. I said, I don't know what else to do. And I got emotional. I was tearing up. So she said, well, let's go talk to him. So somehow she just self-appointed herself to be a mediator. It happened organically. So we sat next to dad and she started the conversation. And I was just like, oh, I don't know if I can do this. This is too much. And when she opened the floor, if you will, by saying that, she'd listened to dad and she'd listened to me, and she just think that maybe we need to talk about things. I don't remember exactly how the conversation started with my dad, but again, I noticed that he was being defensive. And it wasn't like I'm making it up. He was being defensive. And I was explaining to him that when I said, Dad, I'm just trying to help you, that I didn't mean it in a rude way. And talking to dad sometimes I speak in English, sometimes I use Yoruba, or they flow together. That's what we do as Nigerians. And sometimes a word, something I want to say in English, when I translate it to Yoruba, doesn't quite have the impact that I need it to have for me. So I may use English. So I was trying to explain to him that when I said I'm trying to help you, it was because I was nervous. I was thinking about you. I didn't say about your dignity and stuff like that, because I know you'd be like, what do you mean? But I did my best to find the words that really, I was coming from a place of compassion, and you heard it differently. He said, no, that's not true. And when my father decides that, let me say it differently. When something happens, if he sees us, not all the time, but there's been some situations where he just will not change his mind. He's going to hold on to what he thinks it is for whatever reason. So this was the case. He just said, nope. He knew how I meant it. And I was like, okay, you know what? Okay. I left it. And the conversation, we carried on talking. And we got into talking about my childhood. And my sister, her name is Dewumi. Dewumi said, so what was it like with you and him when he was a child? Like she was asking dad, what was our relationship like? And dad said, well, I love him, he loved me, and all that. And I was thinking in my head, yeah, but there's an experience that a child goes through that a child doesn't have the words for. So we talked. He was being defensive, and some of the things were just I was getting pissed off. Like, just listen to me. This is not a judgment. Just listen to me. Listen to my pain. I became like, Linda, listen to me, daddy. Because when we talk to him, we say daddy, really. When I'm talking about him, I say dad. Sometimes I say my father. But yeah, I was like, listen to me. listen to what I'm saying, listen to my heart. And he basically was like, whatever. He didn't say that, but that's how it came across to me. And I remember there was a point when I said, you know what, I give up. I didn't say it out loud because I would never say that to my dad. I just said, I give up. However, in giving up, I kept saying to Spirit, okay, God, whatever I need to hear, let me hear it. Whatever I need to say, give me the words, because I don't know what else to do. And there were times that I got upset. Once again, our culture, if you're having a conversation with an elder, whether they're your parents or not, and you get upset, they see that as a disrespect of them. They don't see it as you're moving through your own process and you're frustrated or mad. They may have contributed to it, but it is you getting mad. It's not really about them, but they make it about them and say you're being disrespectful. So there were times when I just got mad and my sister's like, calm down, you get mad. And I'm like, yes, I am mad. And she was trying to tell me to calm down because we're talking to Dad. And I'm like, I don't have the space for what you're asking me to do. I was a mess. I was emotional. I was hoping, wishing, praying that we get to a place where healing happened. But I didn't see it. I didn't think it was going to happen. I didn't see how. Because Dad just refused to hear me. And as he refused to hear me, the more I felt like this is pointless. So he said, there are many things he didn't tell me when he was in Nigeria and when he was in America that I don't know about. And I'm listening to him. I'm thinking, yeah, because I don't trust you. I didn't say it out loud. But then there was a point where I just felt like, you know what? I have to say what is true for me because I don't think I will ever have this moment again. It was scary, but at that time I was ready to just risk it all. I said, okay, Dad, I'll tell you. Memory. You can tell a story, but in the moment, in the now, it feels very present. Ooh, I can't get it out. It's harder for me to say now because this sadness that I feel around. It's different now. Even I'm going all over the place. Just stay with me. I'm having a moment. The thought of what I'm about to say and how I feel about it, to just getting in touch with the fact that I felt that about my father is sad. And this is why I'm saying, I started off earlier saying to parents to recognize the impact you have in your children's life. Even if you think they won't listen to you, whatever it is, whatever label you decide to put on them, recognize you have an impact. So anyway, I'll come to that. I said, Dad, the reason I didn't tell you some of the things I went through is because I didn't feel safe with you. I didn't feel that you can hold my emotions and the things that I was dealing with. And I remember as I was saying, I was like, oh, shoot. Am I saying these words out loud? Because as a Yoruba man talking to a Yoruba father, you don't say that to your parents. You just don't. But I did. I needed to. It was beyond me calculating. It was something that needed to happen as I was asking from the divine to help me move through this healing process. It meant I needed to be vulnerable. It didn't mean that. What I know is there is no healing without vulnerability. And oftentimes people can talk about things that happened, that they're trying to heal, blaming somebody, accusing somebody, blaming themselves. but it could be very heady from the neck up. But unless we're willing to go to the heart, unless we're willing to go to the soul, unless we're willing to tell the truth, whether the other person is going to agree with it or not, which means you're risking being, well, just to telling the truth, there's a risk to be raw, to be vulnerable. And when you do that, healing would happen. I've had many experiences like that. Anyway, so I risked it. I risked revealing myself to my father like that and not knowing how I was going to hold that conversation. And at that point, I said it and I was quiet. And my sister and my dad were talking. I felt at peace. A little bit. Like, yeah, there it is. I said it. Because I'm those who know me know that I'm quite sensitive. I don't fit the stereotype of what a man is supposed to be. Don't care too much about sports, only when it's like finals. I don't drink. I don't go to clubs and get drunk. Not that I'm better than any man out there, but that's just something. I'm just different. I'm wired differently. We all are wired differently. We all have our individual ways, unique way in showing up in the world. But don't be fooled. There is that manliness about me when I get angry. Woo-hoo! Oh, that fire, that Aries fire will show up. And for the most part, I believe that I can control it. Let me say this way, rather than control it, I am aware. I can watch myself being who I'm being in the moment and decide, is this what you want to do? Is this way of being going to get you to the result that you need? Or sometimes I just take a breath. I'm like, I can't have this conversation. Not right now. So in that peaceful state, I just left it. And then, as I said, my sister and dad were talking about it. They kept talking about something I don't remember. And then somewhere around that time, my sister, she was cooking before she decided to be the mediator. She was really a God-appointed mediator. When life is always self-organizing, reorganizing itself. And when we allow our hearts to break open enough, love will find a way. And you will be led to doing what is right. And it becomes an organic process. It's almost like you're not even thinking about it. It just happens. So at that moment, she needed to go check what she was cooking. And at the same time, I thought, well, this is a good time for me to go to the restroom. So I went upstairs to use the restroom. Washed my hands and came down quickly, but my hands were a little bit wet. But I wasn't worried about it because I wanted to stay in that energy, even though I was done with it. Like, this is not going anywhere. And I came back down. I sat back next to Dad. My sister came back. Give me a moment. And as I sat down, sometimes when I tell this story, I can tell it. I get emotional, but other times it grabs me. It hits me really deep. And to tell the truth, once that spirit voice told me what this show is going to be about, I think that's been another reason why it's been hard to really do this show. Because I know this is going to happen. So my father grabbed my hand. Now, my main love language is physical touch. Maybe because I didn't get enough of it, a lot of it, when I was younger from my biological mother. I was with another woman, another mother. So my father grabbed my hands. I don't remember if it was both or just my left one. Basically, he activated something in me. And he said, oh gosh. And he said, please forgive me for whatever I've done to you to cause you pain. And I remember him saying something like, and your siblings as well, I ask for their forgiveness. My father was an 89-year-old man, a Nigerian man. That's not common. That's not almost not natural. And it wasn't surprising necessarily. I don't know. It wasn't surprising because my father's quite affectionate. We talk about, he tells me, he said, I don't understand sometimes when I watch the news or watch a commercial and it's based on the story that I'm seeing, I get emotional. I start to tear up. Something about him, I feel, didn't fully embrace that because our culture is like, a man doesn't get emotional. You don't cry. What's wrong with you? Tearing up? We didn't have, not to my knowledge anyway, have a phrase like man up. It's just something we don't do. Well, actually, I guess the equivalent of that is you be asked a question. Because I remember my dad did that to me many years ago. And I remember saying, I'm never going to share my emotions with you. It was something that happened with him and mom. I was in America then, and I got emotional. He said, why are you crying? You're not a woman. No, how did he say? Oh, we should be. Yeah, you're not a woman. Basically, you're not a woman while you cry. So it's like, what you doing? Stop it. But my father, how he is with children, how he was with us when we were younger, very touchy feely, very emotional. He likes kids. He loves kids. Or he loved kids, and just he's just very affectionate. And so anyway, as he said that, I just wept. It was automatic. There was no thought. I was in the moment. I just cried. Like I've never cried in a long time, probably ever, or maybe once or twice. And I remember hearing a voice in my head saying, this is all I ever wanted. The voice wasn't audible because I didn't say it out loud. It was something in me saying, this is all I ever wanted. And for me, that was my child. That was my inner child. That little boy who was confused about who's mom, who's dad. Why am I in London this weekend? Next weekend, I'm in Hastings. Where, there's that energetic biological connection that wasn't there on a daily basis. I just cried. And I think after that he prayed or something, because that's also our way. Nigerians, Yoruba people, we have a relationship with the creator. And I intentionally say creator, because we all have our understanding, definition of who and what God is. For some people, God is Jesus. For other people, it's Buddha. It's Muhammad, or religious beliefs of what God is. Our culture is beyond religion. how our practice, the African spirituality, is beyond the organized religion, that there is something, there is a power, there's an entity, there's a presence that created everything. Of course, over the years, things, religion took hold of that and demonized African spirituality. So prayer is a way of life. If you ask a Nigerian person, how are you doing today? Dukbelo alone, which means we give thanks to God. Or Uju alone, we're looking to God. When I was growing up in Nigeria, hardly would they say, things are hard. There are people who did it, but generally it's like we're looking to God. We give thanks to God. So my father prayed. I think we hugged. Really, most of what happened after that was a fug, because that request, that statement, his act of love touched a part of me that I don't think I could have touched and healed myself. And I kind of doubt, but I also believe all things are possible. But I would stick to my doubt. I doubt that anybody else could have healed that part of me that was seeking my father's healing. My father passed, made his transition in August 2023. So, but just a little over 4 months ago. And this experience that we went through happened in December 2022. It changed my relationship with my father. I was able to relate to him in a new way. I felt safer with him. I felt safer with him sharing my vulnerabilities. We had different conversations. Even when he did things that I disagreed with, I had space for him. I remember talking to him, because that happened on a Sunday. I came back home to Leicester on a Monday. And I was thinking about it. I said, I don't want that experience to just be something that happened and then we're too nervous, afraid, scared to revisit, to talk about it. Because when something like that happens, in that moment, you're in it. It is important to have a conversation around stuff like that. So whether it's a disagreement or whether it's an agreement, in the midst of it, you are different. When you have time, when there's space between you and what happened, it's important to have that conversation. So maybe it's a disagreement, to revisit it and see, I don't know what happened yesterday, depending on your relationship. But hopefully you can get to a place where you can say, I don't know what happened yesterday, but it really broke my heart that we went there and we said the things that we said to one another. Or, what you said to me yesterday, last week, really meant a lot. No one has ever told me that. It's important, once you've had time to reflect, to revisit that experience. That's a way to embody it, to make it real, to claim it. Because if you don't, you just might forget. You just might forget that something that really you can consider an answered prayer, or something that healed your heart, that healed your mind, that healed your body through a conversation, you might just forget. So even though I was like, how do I bring the conversation up? I knew I needed to have the conversation. So I had the conversation with him on Tuesday. And I told him, I said, you gave me a gift when you asked for forgiveness. And I said, just when you said those words, I just lost it. And my father said, you think you're the only one that cried? I was like, oh, really? He did? I didn't know. But that was another way of him telling me that he cried too. See, he's quite sensitive. But I was like, oh, and our conversation was just so sweet. I felt closer to him. I felt more connected to him. He passed in August 2022, but the months before that, like June, July, was difficult because he decided he wanted to go back to Nigeria. And my siblings and I, we didn't want him to go back, but he said he was going back. And he'd also said he wanted to die in Nigeria. But when he came over, because he used to go back and forth, when he came here, I think it was November 2022, he had said that, he's at peace wherever it happens. If he passes here, if he dies here, then so be it. So we were happy about that. Around April, he said he was going back. And we're like, why? He didn't even tell us. Well, he told my younger sister. My younger sister told us. He never told me. And I couldn't have a conversation with him because I was too upset. And my younger sister told me that Dad said, your brother hasn't even spoken to me about me going to Nigeria. And she told him, well, everybody needs time to process the information. I eventually did tell him, and I told him why I hadn't had a conversation with him. And then this point, I didn't tell him. I was like, how dare he say I haven't spoken to him about him going to Nigeria when he's the one that decided to go back to Nigeria, and he didn't speak to us because he knew that we won't be in agreement. Anyway, he did go back, and his health just went downwards. And there were things that was happening in Nigeria that we were not happy about. Yeah. Not happy about is an understatement. And then he got to a point where to watch him, see him be in pain and not be able to help was hard. My younger sister went over. She came back. She went over to Nigeria and he got better. My father wasn't walking before my sister got there. He was barely eating. My sister was there for about a week. So Dad was walking again. Slow, but he had his strength back. And then we were trying to bring him back over here. He said, no, he's not ready. We had to accept his choice. We had no choice but to accept his choice. And then July, things were hard. It was difficult. I went through so much. My siblings did as well. But I felt helpless. I was angry for some of the things that they were doing to him and some of the treatments, how he was treated at one of the hospitals. And in August, actually just before he passed, the week before, I told my younger sister, listen, we are going to Nigeria. I can't do this anymore. We can't try to be doing this from here and trying to get people to do things. There are things we need to do. My sister and I were supposed to talk, I think on a Saturday or that weekend. Dad died on a Sunday. I was in shock, of course. But the most important thing about that for me was I was devastated. I was crushed. I was heartbroken. And I still have my moments where I can't believe he's not here. But you know what? I am so grateful. I am so grateful that my father gave me that gift of love when he asked for forgiveness, because he healed something in me that I've been carrying for years from childhood. And because he gave me that gift, it's not a sort of like he gave me that gift. So no, it was an energetic, it was a spiritual thing, it's an internal thing. He healed me from the inside out, that today I'm at peace with his death. That first week, I didn't want it to be, and yet I was at peace. Because that moment where he grabbed my hand and said, please forgive me for anything that I may have done to hurt you. It's kind of like what they say in the Christian tradition. He wiped away the scene of my pain. That act of love healed me at a deeper level. It gave me peace. And when my father left this planet, I now feel like there was nothing left unsaid. I was telling someone a few days ago, if that experience with my father didn't happen, I would be a mess today. I'm so grateful for a loving father, a father who came from a tradition where I love you is not the things that we do. We don't say it. There was no need to say it. You knew your parents love you. And it wasn't our culture. There's nothing wrong with a culture where people don't say I love you. We sometimes try to make it wrong. If I grew up, I mean, people say it now in Nigeria, but if I was born in Nigeria, lived in Nigeria, never came to this country, I probably wouldn't even understand when people say I love you. It's like, yeah, okay. That's like me telling my father, I'm your son. I know I'm his son. He knows I'm his son. I know he's my father. But his love, his willingness to yield to greater wisdom, his willingness to parent me, his willingness to be open-hearted, to allow himself to be used and put away his pride, to surrender to a greater love, lives on through me forever and ever and ever and a day. There's a lot more that has happened since the last show in September 2022. But this is one of many things. And I hope that you were able to follow, because there's so many tentacles, if you will, to it, and I had to narrow it down. But parents, fathers, share your story. It's okay to accept that you made a mistake. Even if at the time you didn't think you were making a mistake, but when you look at it through the eyes of your children, look at it through the eyes of your wife, of your partner, of your spouse, and you can say, yeah, I can see that. It's okay to say I was wrong. It's healing, not just for you, not just for them, but for you. My father, I was healed, and so was my father. When you forgive, you are forgiven. And you forgive yourself for asking for forgiveness. I've shared this story in different spaces, and I found it fascinating. Someone said to me, when you told that story, I had to turn my camera off because I was tearing up. And this person said, my Nigerian father would never do that. Never. She said, you know what I did? I took your words and what your father did and imagined that my father was apologizing to me. Like, whoa, I thought it was just about me. When we give to all. When we withhold from all. We are connected. We are all connected. Regardless of what we want to put in the way, whether it's race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender, religious belief, all the things that we fight about, like babies, like 3-4-year-olds. Like, that's mine. Mine is better than yours. As grown-ups, we're doing that. I don't know if we're growing up. It's a consciousness. I get it. But behind and beyond all of that, there is a unifying field that is always available for us to say, really, always available for us to just lean into. It's a network. It's a connective tissue. It's an invisible veil. To love deeply is hard sometimes. But to love deeply calls for us to die so that a new way of being can be birthed. My father died the day he said, please forgive me. I died. The old me that was always struggling with identity and my connection with my father died. And his words of love rebirthed me. The retreat, white nanny, black child, gave me a gift because I was willing to look back and face the things that I was running from or didn't know how to be with. When we don't spend time to be with things we can't be with, guess what? The things you can't be with won't let you be. And as we make space for the things that we struggled with, no matter how horrible it was, no matter how traumatic it was, we must find it within ourselves. You may not be able to do it alone. Get help. Get a therapist. Take a course. Not just courses that just deal with you from an intellectual place. I'm talking about a course that takes you, an embodied course where you go in and tap into the feelings, connect with the feelings. You don't have to uproot everything. You just have to remember there's some things you're running from, hiding from, avoiding, and you're ready to face it. And remember, there is no healing without vulnerability. You're going to be vulnerable. You have to be vulnerable if you want to heal. Even you, I'm just a logical person. Okay. It's okay to be logical, but allow that logic to take you through all of you, to connect with your inner self, your inner child, your, if you want to call it, your inner being, your whole self. Parents have a responsibility to be the space for healing. Mothers, fathers, tell your story. Instead of telling the story of, I don't want you to end up like me, I don't want you to be like, no. If you don't tell the truth based on how you saw it then, but the only thing, and you're just telling them, I don't want you to be like me, what you're really telling them is you're actually praying. You're praying, you're speaking the words of them being like you. And then you start fighting something that hasn't happened, and energetically, you're lifting that up. But if you told them what it was like, mothers, maybe you got pregnant when you were 14, 15, 16. And share what you remember about that moment, how scared you were, how maybe later on you heard your parents' voice and you realized they were right. Or maybe you heard their voice and you feel like they were wrong, and how you have to figure it out. Or how maybe an auntie, a grandmother, a grandfather, an uncle came to your rescue. Maybe you abused physically, emotionally. Now, it's important before you figure it out, you tap into the guidance. But I would say it's also important for you to be with that experience first before you have a conversation with your children, or else you're just going to dump your emotional garbage on them. And then you won't know what to do. And we've become a society now where we welcome conversations about mental health. Some people today are dealing with all sorts of mental ill health. And the roots, the cause of it, is what they went through as a child. And maybe their parents, their aunties, their uncles, brother or sister couldn't bring themselves to tell the truth. The truth will set us free. And when we're willing to tell the truth, we close that gap of othering. If we keep othering people, the pain and the hurt and the trauma gets wider and bigger and wider and bigger. We magnify it. But if a few of us are willing to close that gap, the gap of separation, because we know and remember that we are connected. Doesn't matter where someone lives in the world. It doesn't matter what their political agenda is. That we are connected. As you heal the network. There's a common phrase where people say, hurt people hurt people. As human beings, we love talking about pain and trauma. We want to talk about it over and over and over and over. And it's okay to talk about it. It is necessary to talk about it. But my thing is, don't just keep talking about the trauma. Don't just keep talking about you being hurt. What are you going to do about that? So yes, hurt people. But that's not the whole story. Healed people heal people. Honor places where you've been hurt, where you've been harmed, abused, misused, betrayed. Honor it. Face it. Don't run from it. All of it, when you put it together, is all part of this process, this journey, this practice of being you. So, just a little reminder, I will drop new episodes every 2 weeks on a Tuesday. Thank you for riding with me. It's time to release this conversation. I love you. I bless you. I appreciate you. And I thank God for you. Peace and blessings. Let love be. See you next time.